Hi, this is Simolytics. Welcome to another lesson. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts or questions in the comments. Let's get started. Previously, I said Excel, Power Query, and Power Pivot are separate platforms that work in close relationship. The same goes with Power BI. Power BI is separate from Power Query and Power Pivot, and they also work in a close coordination to make things happen. But it's important to remember that both Power Query and Power Pivot, they live both in Excel and in Power BI. In this video, we are going to see how that all works in practice, how they work in close relationship, although they are separate platforms. So I have a totally blank Excel here. I don't have any data. I didn't enter any data in my Excel. Imagine I want to import a set of data into this file, but let's say the table I want to use here, it has over a million rows. So you will see here that Excel has a row limit. So the maximum number of rows I can work with is 1,048,576 rows. So if I have a table that has more rows than this number, I can handle it in Excel, okay? So for example, let's imagine that this table here, F sales, let me open it up. It's another Excel file. And this table is a table with sales data, sales information. And for this example, this table has only 1,000 rows, but imagine you working with a table that has over 2 million or 5 million rows. So if you're working with a table that has over a million rows, you can handle it in bare Excel. So you have to do something else, okay? If I had under the row limit, I could, for example, just copy all this data and paste it into my blank Excel. I could just paste it here and then go from here. But remember, we are simulating a situation in which I'm working with a table that has, say, 2 million rows. So I can't just paste it into Excel because there's not enough rows to handle the data. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to import that data into Power Query. I'm not going to show here in this video how to import the data. We're going to see this carefully later on, but I just want to show you that although I haven't entered any data into my Excel file, I have already uploaded my data to Power Query. And if I click twice here, then my Power Query editor will open up and you'll see that my data is imported, all available here in Power Query, although my Excel sheets are totally blank. So I have the data. It's all in the Excel workbook, but you can have access to the data, well, at least by now, through the basic spreadsheet. Of course, there's many ways in which you can work the data and bring it back from here, from Power Query into Excel. Let's actually give an example of how we can do it. Let me just I'll keep the first top 10 rows, remove all the rest. And I could, for example, bring the data from Power Query to Excel. I could just close and load. And then what I'm doing here, I'm bringing the data that I had uploaded in Power Query and I'm bringing it over to Excel. Okay, let me right click and load to table. Okay, don't worry about the steps I'm taking here because I'm going to explain it all later on. I just want you to see how the data is coming from Power Query. I upload it into Power Query. I worked it in Power Query, and now I'm bringing it over to my Excel table. And now I have my data in my Excel table, and check it out. It's a transformed table. So the the changes I made in data here in my Power Query editor, I just moved them to my Excel spreadsheet. And I did the same with my D stores table. Look, let me just undo the changes. And then I have another table, the D stores table, that I haven't moved into Excel. But even though I don't have this D stores table in Excel, let me discard my changes. Although I don't have that data from the distors table in Excel, my table is available for me. So I can use it and I can associate the distors table with the F sales table to work them as if they were just one. And how am I supposed to do it? I can just use my Power Pivot to actually create a data model. So in my diagram view, this window here, this window shows my Power Pivot, my data model in the Power Pivot. So now what I have done here, I have a representation of my two tables, my D source table and my F sales table. So the store key is the field that makes it possible to associate both tables and use them as if they were just one. Again, I'm not showing how to make it all at this point, but we will see it in detail later. I just wanted to see that so far we use the Power Query window, the Power Query editor, and now we are using Power Pivot, which is a separate platforms. But having associated my data in Power Pivot, when I come back to Excel, I can, for example, create a new, let me insert a pivot chart, a pivot table actually, from my data model. So I will create it in my existing worksheet. And then as I have created the data model with all the information I had in both tables, and as I have associated both tables, I can use any data from both tables to create my analysis. For example, let's see, I want to know from my store name, I want to know what were my unit cost, what was my unit cost for each of my stores. So then I can use data from different tables as if they were just one through the relationships I created in Power Pivot. So this is the same idea that works for Power BI. The only difference is that in Power BI, you don't have a separate table, a separate window for Power Pivot. So the window that was supposed to be Power Pivot is already embedded as one of the panes in Power BI. But Power Query, like I showed before, it's essentially the same thing as in Excel. Now in Power BI, I also have a blank file, and I haven't entered any data into Power BI. Power BI is not meant to receive data entered manually. So instead, you should import data from different sources. But you can see that I have already imported the same two tables into Power BI, the D-store table and the F sales table. But I imported it through Power Query, and I will show you that if I pull up the Power Query editor in Power BI, it looks pretty much the same as in Excel. And I have the same two tables in Power Query, and I can just, well, actually import the data directly from Power Query. And now I can move it into Power BI. I'll click Close and Apply, and then I'll have my data available in Power BI to use it as I see fit. And regarding Power Pivot, I told you that Power Pivot in Power BI is a little different from Power Pivot in Excel in the sense that you don't have to open a separate window. It could still be considered as a separate platform, although you are not opening a new window. So you can find Power Pivot here in Power BI in the model view. So the model view is actually works the same way as the Power Pivot window, the Power Pivot platform in Excel. So the same relationships among tables that you do in Power Pivot in Excel, you can do it from here, from the model view in Power BI. So you can see a parallel between the way Excel works with Power Pivot and Power Query. It's the same way Power BI does. It just looks a little different because you don't have a specific table for Power Pivot as in Excel, but they work the same way. Now, you can use your data that is integrated through a data model and that has been imported from Power Query after any transformations, any data cleansing, or any change that you might want to do. And then now I can use my data. So let's say I want to create a chart. So I'll use my store name, and then for my store names, I want my total my unit prices. So it's going to sum up all the unit prices. We will talk more about how to create all these charts in Power BI. But in this video, I just wanted you to see the dynamics between Power BI, Power Query, Power Pivot, Excel, and how they work separately, but at the same time in a perfect coordination. See you in the next video.